What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of my podcast, Happy Days, with me, Callum Church. Today, I want to talk a little bit about self-analysis and self-awareness, because this is something which I've spoken about on the podcast before. I've spoken about it prior, but I don't think I've actually truly highlighted just how important this is. And that's not me waffling. That's not me, bigging it up. Self-awareness and self-analysis it's absolutely critical to anyone's self-development. It's absolutely critical to anyone's growth. Okay, so to kick off the episode, let's talk a little bit about what is self-awareness, because for those people that don't know what self-awareness, it's the type of people that aren't running on autopilot. Okay, because this world is full of zombies, people going about their lives almost subconsciously. Have you ever had it in your life where you might be, just going about your life, living your life, and you might go a number of years, and then you look back on things and you think, wow, where did that all go? And a lot of the time that's because we're not really living truly consciously. We're not living truly present. We're not particularly self-aware. We're kind of going through our lives like zombies. That's what the majority of people do. And then every now and then you come across these people in our lives who are very self-aware. They're very switched on. They're very self-analytical. They're the type of people that aren't attached to emotions. They don't get rowdy or frustrated by everything and every little thing. They're very measured and deliberate. They're those kinds of people. Yeah, they don't have wild emotions, and a lot of the time they're actually people that don't have issues in their life. They don't particularly have many issues, and I don't mean the external issues. I mean the internal issues. They're not people who suffer from anxiety much. They're not people who maybe are frustrated with what's going on in their life. They're not overly struggling, and the reason for this is typically because they've probably struggled in the past, right? And that's kind of what's launched them into their self-awareness, let's say, or their own self-analysis. So they're not the type of people that really struggle. And they're also not virtue signalling. So they're the people that don't have to sit there and feel like they need to big themselves up. They don't have to sit there and talk about how great they are as people, because I think if you're self-aware enough, you know how obnoxious that comes across to someone who thinks about these things, someone who's self-aware. They're the type of people that you may call wise people, although I think the word wise is interesting because they might not necessarily be wise. They might just be self-analytical, and they might just be, they're thinkers. Wisdom comes with thought. I don't think a lot of people call someone wise, and they might not necessarily be wise, but they might just be self-analytical. People have called me wise in the past, and look, I'm 20 years old. I'm not wise. I don't have a lot of experience on my belt. But the reason why people call me that is because I'm quite self-analytical. I'm quite self-aware. I think about these things. I think about the self. I analyse myself. And that's why it comes across as wise. And that's why people might call self-aware people wise, but really they're not. So why is self-analysis and self-awareness important? Well, think of it like this. How is a scientist going to be able to find new discoveries in science and the world and biology, chemistry, physics, whatever, how are they going to find any new discoveries if they don't analyze things, if they don't test and try and ponder? They're not going to get anywhere, are they? Scientists don't just stumble into their discoveries, and if they do, it's usually through it's usually after they've analysed certain things a long time and given things a lot of thought. If people, I'm sure people listening to this right now are sitting there thinking, well, Newton's stumbled upon gravity. And, at first sight, on when you first look at it, you'd probably say yes, and I'd probably agree. But actually, the only reason why Newton was able to sit under that tree one day, have the apple fall on his head, and then, discover gravity, it was because he was already pondering. He was already analysing prior to having that apple fall on his head. That was simply just the eureka moment. It's not to say that he didn't put the work in prior, or he didn't think about these things prior. He had to get himself in the right frame of mind and the right mindset to be able to realise and snap onto that apple falling on his head, and then, discovering gravity, the rest is history, as they say. So it's important that we have to analyse, and it's also important that we have to understand before we can even truly discover things. We have to, have foundations of understanding before we can develop our thinking or develop our discoveries or theories or whatever. I'm not saying that self-development is a science, but the whole analysis side of what we're talking about in this conversation is, it relates a lot of the time. But by no means am I saying that self-development is a science. It's not. And it's important for self-development, when we're talking strictly about self-development, not just analysis, but self-development strictly, it's important that we think about why we are the way we are. How are we supposed to grow as people if we don't sit here and try and untangle and unwind the reasons for why we are the way we are? What makes us up? What makes a person anxious? What makes a person driven? What makes a person poor even? What makes a person physically fit? What makes a person good in social situations? It's important that we try and unravel these things to understand it, so that we can improve ourselves, so that we can take these things and take them into our armory of the self. Take the social abilities of one person and take that on ourselves. Take on the financial abilities of someone and take that on ourselves. Look at someone's achievements in their own physical development and take that on ourselves. Try and figure out how they did it, and then figure out how we can do it too. Yeah, and it's pretty much just about thinking about what can we do in order to improve the next time around. We might fail at something, so we have to sit there and analyse that for a moment and think about, why did we fail at? What went wrong? What can we do better, and how can we be better the next time? What steps do we have to put into place, and what steps do we need to take in order to be better the next time round? That's self-development. Failing and getting better the next time, right? And the crucial part in between those two parts, the crucial glue which holds, which stands between the failure and the success, is the self-analysis, is the self-awareness. That's what gets you from failure to success. Because if you fail, and you don't self-analyse, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you fail, and self-analyse in between each time, chances are you'll get better and better and better until you succeed, right? So yeah, and also, being a self-aware person, it just genuinely makes you a more attractive person in general. I think so anyway. That's in my opinion. And I was actually, the whole reason why I'm talking about this in today's episode right now is because I was listening to a really fascinating podcast, which I got recommended from a friend. It was from the Tim Ferriss show. And basically they were talking about, what types of people to stay away from. Stay away from the narcissists, stay away from the people that go about their lives like zombies and don't truly self-analyse and aren't truly self-aware. Because it's the self-aware people that are more attractive. It's the self-aware people that are easier to be around. Who wants to sit around someone who's controlled by their emotions all the time? Who wants to sit around a bum who's not going to get anywhere in life? It's the self-aware people that are going to succeed. It's the self-aware people that are going to be more pleasant to be around. So I think it's quite important that we think about these things. That's why I'm doing this episode right now. I think it's an important episode. That's a massive understatement. I think this is a crucial episode. So yeah, it's important that we think about these things. So here is the actual crux of today's episode. This is what you've probably been sat here waiting for the past 9 minutes. What can we actually do to self-analyse? How can we get better at becoming self-analytical, and how can we become self-aware as people? Well, I've jotted down a few different practices. I don't want to say practices, but yes, practices, I suppose, or I guess activities, things that you can implement into your life to become more self-aware as people. So first of all, I've put down read philosophy. I'm not talking about philosophy entirely. I'm not talking about broad philosophy. I'm talking about the self-analytical philosophy. And I've written down some here. I mean, there's, people like your Socrates and your Platos, and then you've got the Stoics. I've written down the Stoics as well. So I've got Marcus Aurelius, Seneca the Younger, who, as you guys know, is my favourite philosopher. I bang on about him every single time that I'm talking about philosophy. But it's because actually Seneca was the one who, looking back on things now and thinking about it, Seneca was the one that actually kicked off my own self-development. And it was through reading his philosophy and his letters, about living a better life and being better as people. It was actually through reading his philosophy that actually kind of kick-started my own self-development, and actually kick-started my own self-awareness, kind of reignited that within me. I think I think that plays a massive part in the reason why I am who I am today. It's because of the stuff I've read through Seneca. I've also put people like Kant and Freud, and actually someone that they mentioned during the podcast, which I was talking about earlier, was someone called Anthony de Mello. And I don't know tons about this guy. I don't know tons, but I've actually read one of his books. I had it recommended to me through a friend, Race Ruard, who was actually on the podcast, one of the very early guests of this podcast. And he recommended a book to me called Awareness by Anthony de Mello. And at first it might be a bit of a difficult read for some people because it jumps deep into some concepts and some real self critique and self-analysis that goes deep, and that will be a tough read for the zombies that are out there that aren't totally self-aware. But luckily, I suppose I read Seneca and stuff like that, which helped me to understand Anthony de Mello's writings for the most part. But I just thought I'd throw that in there because I mentioned it during the podcast, and he's certainly self-analytical. So reading philosophy, I think this is really important. Why? Is because, look, although self-development is the development of the self, it's a very personal journey, sometimes we do need help from external sources. Sometimes you do need to listen to a podcast. Sometimes you do need to listen to Happy Days with Callum Church, let's say, everyone's favourite podcast. But hey, sometimes we do need to take in, ideas and just understandings and philosophy from external sources. Not everything's going to come from yourself all the time. Sometimes it's good to absorb the teachings and the understandings of other people. That's certainly what I've done in my life. And Seneca's and Marcus Aurelius's, their teachings has impacted me hugely, massively. I used to be a much more anxious person before I started reading that philosophy. And I'm a much better person for it now, And through reading this philosophy, it's what, switched me onto self-awareness, switched me onto self-analysis, and has helped me to that was essentially what ignited my fire for self-development. And that fire has continued to burn, and I've done it myself following that. But it's important that we take on other people's philosophies and understandings and teachings, to help us get there, and it certainly helps to ignite that flame within us to do that. So that's why I put down read philosophy. I've also put down 3 here, which are tied in pretty closely. It's more or less the same thing. I've put down meditation, time spent with thoughts, and spiritual exploration. In some ways, you could argue that these are all of the same thing. So meditation, time spent with thoughts, and spiritual exploration. When I say spiritual exploration, I mean, exploring the fact that you are more than just a body, and exploring the fact that you are more than just your thoughts. You are the awareness behind the thoughts. There's tons of recent episodes I've done to talk about this. Top of my head, check out Tobias Matthews' episode, and I've got some more recent episodes on like consciousness and that kind of thing as well. So Alex Shayler off the top of my head as well. So make sure you check those episodes out if you haven't done already. But yeah, just the spiritual exploration is just understanding that you are the awareness behind your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. That is why I mentioned at the start of the episode that self-aware people aren't ruled by their emotions as much as the zombies would be. When something frustrating happens, when you get a letter from HMRC and you have to pay tax or something, you don't get kicked up in a rage. It is what it is type mentality. you just don't get so swayed by your thoughts. You don't get ruled by your thoughts, and your mood isn't affected by your emotions. Your mood and your emotions are different. Your mood is just how you're feeling, and your emotions are the signals which your brain gives you to act in a certain way. So if something frustrates you, maybe try and stay away from that. That's not an excuse to be in a bad mood. It's just a signal, and that's what it is. And through meditating and spending time with your thoughts, you can get better at this. But that's slightly besides the point. I'm talking about self-awareness, self-analysis. Meditation is it's more or less time spent with your thoughts. There's lots of different ways to meditate, but the meditation I'm talking about now is literally just spending time with your thoughts. And this doesn't necessarily have to be sitting down, crossing your legs, and just observing your thoughts. This could be going out for a quiet walk or something, or this could be sitting on the sofa and just seeing what thoughts come through your head at that point in time. That's what I'm talking about. And by sitting there for a little period of time and just seeing what thoughts pop in your head, just take account of what's going on in your head at that point in time. You can really start to unwind, why you are that certain way. So if there's like feelings of frustration in you and you're not quite sure why that is, a practice which you can do to actually unravel that is just sit there and just let your thoughts float by. Just let your thoughts think. Just sit there and think, but not think on purpose. Just think. We're always thinking. Let's be honest. We don't ever shut off our thoughts. We're constantly thinking. So just spend time to separate yourself from those thoughts and observe the thoughts as opposed to think the thoughts. Does that make sense? I hope so, because I don't have a better way of explaining it. So that's another way in which we can self-analyse. Go for a walk and just see what thoughts pop in your head, or sit on the sofa, see what thoughts pop in your head. Spend some time to meditate and, switch off and on your brain, and then see what thoughts pop in your head. Or do some spiritual exploration and, see what thoughts pop in your head again. So, that all sort of ties in together nicely. And the last point of the podcast, which is something which you don't necessarily do, but it's something that you experience, and it's something which helps you to become more self-analytical and more self-aware, is experiences. And in brackets beside this, I've just put time/age. With different experiences which we have in our lives, we do become, wiser. As I mentioned previously in the podcast, with time you do become more wise, and I use the word wise very loosely there. I mean more self-analytical and more self-aware. With time you do. I suppose you just have more opportunity to think about yourself, and I guess you have more opportunity during your life to have a spiritual awakening, or a sudden realization, or just a sudden self-awareness realization in your life. The older you are, the more chances you've been through that, right? But with these experiences, this is difficult for me to talk about because obviously I'm 20 years old, but the podcast I was listening to, they mentioned certain events like spending a long time with a partner, or having kids, or moving to a different environment. Maybe it might be working in a different career, or it's vast, right? I could sit here and list off things all day, but just through having experiences, we can become more self-analytical. And I suppose that's not necessarily one you can put into place, but it's certainly one that is important to mention, I think, anyway. So, that's more or less all I've got for today's episode. But just to round it off, really, I just want to again, mention how important it is to self-analyse. We're not going to get anywhere if we don't sit there and self-analyse. So make sure that you maybe just section off a few minutes in your day to do some meditation every day, or section off some minutes to. Or some minutes of your day to read some philosophy, or read anything really, anything that's going to help you and get you thinking. And just to analyse these thoughts, think about why we are the way we are. And I suppose keep listening to the podcast, because this will help you. I'm always speaking about self-analysis, whether it's on purpose or not, we're constantly doing that in self-development. So again, that's all that I have for today's episode. I do truly hope that you did enjoy today's episode, as always. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because it does truly help the show. Also, drop me a DM on Instagram. I love connecting with you guys, and I really do want to trigger some more engagement between us, because a lot of the time it's easy to fall into the trap of just seeing your audience as numbers. I want to see you guys as names. I want to see you guys as faces. So please do get in touch with me, guys. Drop me a message. Let me know if you enjoyed the episode. Let me know if you've been listening, and I'd really appreciate that. My Instagram handle is at callum.g.church. Again, I do truly hope that you guys did enjoy today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. So there you go, that's the end of the show. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe on your podcasting app of choice, so you can download and listen as each episode is released. If this episode helped you in any way, tell your friends, tell your family, maybe even leave a cheeky review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps the show. But that's all for now. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next episode, released shortly. Take care.